we had a freedom journey about freedom from judging others.
Yes.
Right? Some time back.
Yeah.
And how
and then we had the freedom from, from being judged by others.
right.
That we would Paul, yes, that was the last one. And we said, it's crazy that Paul says, let me just reiterate where we were there. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 4:3 that the King James says it's a very small thing that I should be judged of you or of his judgment. And very small thing. I love the concordant.
Yeah.
It says, now to me, it is the least trifle that I may be examined by you, or man's day, And I, earlier this morning, I looked up that word trifle in the English word, since that's the way the concordant chose to translate it. And listen to this. I don't even know if I looked it up before. But the dictionary says concerning that, and this is Merriam-Webster, that trifle means of little value, substance, or importance. So people's judgment of us, or as the concordant would say, their examination. Today we're going to examine Steve Martin. And we are going to find out what's wrong with this brother. Well, you know what it is to us? It's of little value to us. It's of little substance. It's of little importance.
Yeah, you brought up a memory. We used to have before, back in the day, when I was, even though I was a young man, we had, before communion, we would have examination meetings.
Wow. Yeah.
And we'd have to go in, so we would go in, or the other term they used was council meetings. So we'd all go in this, little groups of 10 at a time, and we'd walk in here and all the preachers would be there. And then we'd have to confirm that we were right with God and right with man.
Wow.
And then that would be the time people would start, complaining about other people, examine it. And wow.
Okay.
And man, we dreaded that because, because you were actually kind of lying, because. Yeah. Because our relationship with God assumed it based on what we were doing, and of course you never could do enough.
Yeah.
And but anyhow.
Hey, you know what? Your was a notch above mine. We didn't have that. Now, we did have examination before communion. It was self-examination, which, by the way, is where we're going today. And so it was now, before we partake of this bread and this wine, this grape juice, we're going to have self-examination, because if you partake unworthily, then the judgment of God will come upon you. Woo, doggy.
Yeah.
You had to judge yourself, or examine yourself. And that's our theme today. It's really part 2 of that last one, where we're not concerned. It's the least trifle what anybody thinks about us, what anybody says about us, what anybody determines about us, anybody's judgment or examination. It's the least trifle. But then this is another step in the freedom.
Well, yeah. And well, it's enough about that. But this whole passage in 1 Corinthians 4, you read part of it. Now to me, it is the least trifle that I may be examined by you, or by man's day. And then he says, but neither am I examining myself.
Yeah.
King James says judging I judge myself.
Yeah.
For of nothing am I conscious as to myself, but not by this am I justified.
Wow.
Now he who examining is the Lord, as so that he, not judging anything before the season, till the Lord should be coming, who will also illuminate the hidden things of darkness and manifest the counsel of the hearts. And then applause will be coming to each one from God.
Yes. Is that beautiful?
About that, for of nothing am I conscious or aware, but neither am I examining myself.
So, what Paul's extending from the earlier part of that verse is even self-examination or self-judgment. Even self-examination was the least trifle to Paul. It was the least value, the least substance, the least importance, this examination. Now that's freedom.
That is freedom. But how are we able to get to that place? Yes. What the main, because basically it says I can't even judge myself until it's all over.
Yes.
Because we don't know what the plan of God is.
No. And we won't be the ones doing the examining. We won't be the ones doing the judging, And I love in that passage you read, there's no examination or judging before the season. In other words, there's a Ecclesiastes says there's a time for everything.
Right. And
this is not the judgment time. This is not the examination time. And so here's what we say. It's a glorious truth. It's a glorious day when you come to the realization of that, is that all judgment, all examination is premature today. It's all premature. And this includes judging others. This includes others examining us. And this, more importantly, maybe, for our own spiritual well-being, is that it extends to us. We are not judging or examining ourselves. That is premature. And you raise a good question. How is that? Why is that premature? How could Paul be so bold to say that he doesn't examine himself, that he doesn't judge himself? Isn't that what everybody does? Everybody judges themselves and examines themselves, and it results in either self-condemnation, guilt and shame. I'm worthless. Or it's self-exaltation. Man, I am so great. Pride. So those two extremes is what self-judgment and self-examination lead to, and it's all premature. And Paul had the audacity to say that. Not only say it, but God breathed, God inspired to be written in the scriptures.
And Paul, I wish I had thought of this earlier, but Paul talks about it leads to comparison, judging, comparing ourselves to each other.
Yeah. It's not even wise.
It's not even wise. And that's what it leads to a lot of times.
Yeah.
What you're talking about. My feelings about myself a lot of times comes from comparing myself to others.
Yes.
I'm either better than them or they're better than me.
I just wrote this down. Our next freedom journey should be freedom from comparison.
Yeah.
That'll be awesome. And we'll look at that passage because that is an awesome passage. Well, I'll say this. Here's why I believe and understand Paul could make that statement, and that now you and I can make it. You and I can lay hold of this verse that says, neither am I examining myself. And that by the spirit of faith that God has granted us, we are able to say with Paul, you, Steve, and me, both of us, all of us, our listeners can say, in the love to call it the audacity of faith. Faith is, it's audacious to say this, but we can actually believe this verse. This is what I love about the freedom journey. We can believe verses.
Yeah.
And we can say with Paul, it's trifle what anybody's examination is of me, and I don't even examine myself. And how could Paul say that? Well, actually, it's rooted in the sovereignty of God. And the sovereignty of God washes, floods the entire scripture. One place that I'm thinking of, when I was thinking about us talking about this today, is Psalm 139:16, which we reference a lot. And a lot of those who've made this journey with us, we reference this passage a lot. That all the psalmist said, all my days were written in your book. They were formed when there was none of them. Now the question is, Steve, if Father grants you the audacity of faith, and you take that verse seriously and really believe it, how would that verse right there affect you? How would it affect your thinking? How would it affect your life? How would it affect your view of yourself? How would it affect your view of everyone else? So Steve, if you really believed that verse, what would the effect be?
It would be just that. There is no judging because God wrote the script.
Exactly. Yes.
And so I don't even have to think about it. If we get to that place when we see people acting what we think is whatever, we don't judge that.
Yes.
And maybe we love to give people motives and reasons why they're doing whatever they're doing.
Yes.
But they can't help it. It don't matter if it's good or bad.
Yes.
And I like what this verse says. He'll illuminate the hidden hearts or hidden things of darkness and manifest the counsels of the hearts. But then applause will come to everyone.
Yes. Here's a cool thought. I think our religious view, that little portion there, he's going to reveal the hidden things.
Yeah.
Okay. Read that again. You got it before you. Read that little section right there.
Who will also illuminate the hidden things of darkness.
Okay.
And manifest the counsels of the hearts.
Yeah, right there. He will illuminate the hidden things of darkness. You know what I used to think that said? I used to think that said, one day you're going to stand before God, and all those things that you tried to hide from people, all that dark stuff you were doing, God's going to bring that out. But notice what the conclusion is in Paul's statement, applause. Yeah. So you know what? That verse can't be saying that.
No.
You know what this verse is saying? This verse is saying that God has hid his purpose. He has hid this story of his development, and there's stuff you don't know, and there's darkness. There's not light on what's happening in your life and in the course of life. And the only way you and I can be positive about this is to believe that God wrote it. And one day the veil will be lifted, the hidden things of God's glorious plan and purpose will be manifest. That stuff that used to be dark will have the illumination of God on it. And we'll look at every little event in our life and the life of everyone we know. And we're going to say, oh my, it was perfect. I think that's what that passage is saying.
Well, and I agree because, we see God working with the study Bible. And it's out in the open.
Yes. Out in the open.
It's out in the open. Everybody's excited, but there are things going on, like you talk about, that seem dark,
behind the scenes,
seem oppressive. Behind the scenes, God is working
his
plan and all that.
Yes.
Wow, I never
Yeah.
thought about that.
So what you see on the stage as we act out our roles is not the whole story.
Right.
And that's what Paul's talking about. By the way, that's why we need a study Bible that is supporting the sovereignty of God, the fatherhood of God, and the love of God, and this grand purpose. Because it's a freedom Bible, to be able to read this verse and say, oh my, everything I always thought this passage taught, it's teaching the opposite of what I thought it was teaching.
And back to, we can talk about judging others in their dark moments, but that back to our original subject, that's true of us too.
Yes.
We talk about, the older you get, the discussion comes up. What do you regret? What would you do differently if you were to do it all over again?
Yes.
Well, those discussions are worthless, because because while I've done things that on the surface I'm not proud of, I can rest in the fact that God had a purpose.
Yes.
He was working something in those dark moments.
And you acted out that role perfectly.
Right.
And God will applaud you for that.
Right. So how can you have regrets?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a chapter in my book, Being Okay with Not Being Okay. I have a chapter called Shoulda, Coulda, Woulda. And it's based on that very thought right there. I should have done this. If I could, I'd go back and do it differently. I could, shoulda, coulda, woulda. Very, sort of a famous saying. And we have a whole chapter on that. And the fact is, if we believe Psalm 139:16 and have the audacity to embrace it, then there'll be no judgment and no examination of anyone or anything. We won't be judging others. We will not be affected at all by the judgment of others. And then perhaps more importantly, we will not be judging and examining ourselves. We are our worst critics. We are our worst judge. We have self-condemnation, and it is all rooted in religion that fosters this evil concept. In fact, what does Paul say? Paul says in Ephesians 2:10, King James says that we're his workmanship. The Concordance says that his achievement are we. God is achieving our life, failures and all. And one day God will justify everything, every sin, every action. He'll say, Clyde, this is why this happened. This is why you did this. This is why I had you do this. He'll say, Steve, that thing that you weren't proud of, I was actually pretty proud of it, he'll say. Because I'm the author.
Yeah.
And I tell you what, I coached you really good on your role. You did that perfectly. Wonderful job. Oscar won.
Oscar won. Well, people, and I've did this in the past, and I know people do this, but that's what keeps people awake at night.
Yeah.
Is thinking about things they should have said, things they could have done, and when you get older, well, I wish I would have done this in parenting and all that. And when you can start, and in experience, we can start saying, well, God, that was God, this was God, and it's all going to be made right.
Yes.
Life isn't going to go. At some point, these people I maybe separated from because of something I did, God will redeem all of that. And again, I got applause for doing that.
Yes.
Even though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even though he did it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So really, let's think what faith does who believes this. If we believe the absolute sovereignty of God, if we believe that all our days were written before there were any one of them. And we lay in bed at night having what we thought was a bad day. What could we have said differently? What could we have done differently? And you know, the sovereign answer to that is nothing. That was the script. And when we lay hold of that, you want to talk about freedom, peace, calmness, beauty. And what does religion offer? The very opposite of all that.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
I'll start working on it next morning, you know.
Wow. Yeah.
Sovereignty is the antidote.
It is. Oh, sovereignty is the antidote. There's an article there.
Yeah.
Oh, me. Yes. So here's the way
the antidote to a lot of stuff, you know, but especially this.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many people reach out in emails and phone calls and who talk, you know, if we're at a meeting. People want to, especially early in this journey, they want to talk about their regrets and all the things they struggle with. You know, the way, you know, if you struggle with something, or if I struggle with something, it's really the struggle of God. God wrote the struggle, but the antidote is the sovereignty of God. It allows us to cast all care, all anxiety away, and our struggles become non-existent. In faith, they do. Mm-hmm. Now, that doesn't mean we don't have moments of those, because sometimes we have moments when we're not operating and living, you know, in the moment in faith. But it can be a quick adjustment when we take the antidote, which is the absolute sovereignty of God. Now, here's the way I like to think of this. And I try to, when I hear people always talking to me, you know, what they wish they could go back and change. Now, if you really believe God wrote your script, would you really want to go back and change God's script because you're a better playwright than he is? You're a better author than he is? What kind of audacity is that? That's not audacity of faith. That's the audacity of unbelief. Yeah. that thinks you could have done this better, you know. So the way I like to think about it and sometimes help people, I say, okay, you know, there are certain things in school that I wasn't that good at. Math, let's say, was one of them. I struggle with numbers. And so the interesting thing is, let's say I failed a third grade math test. Well, chances are, if I could go back and take it today, I'd ace the third grade math test. I'd get 100. And maybe I got an incomplete on it because I couldn't even finish it. Or maybe I got an F. I got a failure on it when I was in the third grade. But today I could go back and change that. I could get it spot on. But the thing is, if I went back in time, I would erase all the years between my age now and I was in the third grade. I would erase all those years, all that experience, all that growth, all that understanding, all that realization. And do you know what I would get on the test? The exact same score.
Yeah.
So you know what? We can't go back and undo anything. It's a part of the growth. It's a part of the process, you know. And thankfully, Father's taking us somewhere. We're not repeat the third grade, and this is getting better and better. We talk about on the freedom journey. This is getting better and better. It's getting gooder and gooder.
Better and better. Well, you know, I think the other place where people judge themselves, not just from the past, but is from like present. Like, are there things I should be doing? You know, what? Yes. How do I talk about people about these truths?
Yes.
And so the other antidote I think is out there is the fatherhood of God.
Yes.
And it's unending love, salvation of all.
Right.
And so, you know, we're free.
Thank you.
we're free now from judging ourselves when we don't know what to do with current situations.
Yes.
When they're in process, yeah. And so if we trust the Father, the sovereignty, and we trust His love and His fatherhood, and again, those are all kind of quick switches. Once you grasp that, then
you get back on track.
You go hang out with your family, and you don't even have to talk about this stuff.
No,
friends or any of that.
Yeah. And if you have if there's some temptation to fall back into that, there can be an immediate correction.
Yeah.
And it's not even self-induced. It's that resident truth in us. Something we talk about in our book, the edifice, about edification, building up this doctrinal edifice that takes over, and just becomes ever conscious in our life. People say, well, do you never have this thought? Yeah, but it's almost immediately removed by these glorious truths we have. Right. So I'm glad you mentioned that, about the present tense version of that. And what that means is, so things are going on today.
Yeah.
And we have to do something about it. We got to make choices. We got to take action. That's all relative, though. We think about it. We try to weigh the options. We come to some kind of decision and conclusion. And yet we know something. God was the source of that thinking it through, of that coming to a conclusion. Whether it seems right or wrong conclusion, He's the one who's absolutely in charge of that. We still have to do our part. A man purposes his heart, but God's the one who directs his steps. So right. We plan and purpose and make plans, and God overrides them. But He's working in our life. So here's the thing. Even in the middle of decisions and tough situations that we might face today, we can't make the wrong decision. Right. We can't make the wrong choice. And here's the liberty for others too. They're not making the wrong ones either. So you can relax about your life today. We can relax about our decisions today, our choices today, while working on them. And ultimately, though, it's His work in us. And then we can do the same thing with everyone else. And then not only are other people not projects of ours, we're not projects of ourselves. No such thing as a self-man. No such thing as pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps. Now, there's freedom.
You don't have to read self-help books.
No.
And this may be pushing the edge of this subject a little bit, but sometimes when we see things happening in the world and politics and things, and we get this urge that we need to do something.
Yeah.
So we judge ourselves from that and going back to realizing what our role is.
Yeah.
We're not involved in the what's happening in the world. We can't change it. That also is God's sovereign plan.
Yes.
And so we don't have to feel guilt about that either.
No.
And so it's just the further out you take it, the more you realize the freedom that you have.
And you might look over the last decade or maybe the last 5 years and say, man, look at all the bad stuff. Look at the bad direction. You might look over the last 6 months and say, I talked to someone yesterday and they were so concerned about world affairs and national politics. Got a book on that.
Yeah.
But they were very they were very concerned about all that. And they kept saying to me, because they're like, what are we supposed to do about this? And of course you would know my response to that. And they're like, they were baffled, I think, in their heart and their spirit by what they viewed as ignoring these things, and they said, but isn't this stuff all evil and wrong? And I'm like, it's all perfect.
Of course it is.
It's God's script.
Right.
We can relax. And what we do is we focus on our script. Right. That's not our script. So if we get over there and start trying to fix that script, because the heart of the king is in the hand of the Lord, and he changes it and moves his heart any way he wants. And if we get involved in other people's scripts or the world's script or the nation's, and then we will not be able to see and appreciate our script. Right. And I'm going to stay on my script. And you want to talk about peace. Yes. I mean, there's no way not to be on our script. But if you want to lose your peace, then focus on other people's scripts. And wow.
I think that's the realization of that has to come from the Father,
Yes, it does.
That we're on a script, and that relatively we remind ourselves that God's written it. Yep. And it's all going to end well.
Yes, all going to end well. And in fact, it's even well, but it's hidden. Yeah. It's buried under the darkness. We can't see that it's all perfect. It's all where it's supposed to be.
Wow. And
we don't need to fix it.
No.
Why would we need to fix the script of God?
We can't even fix it if we What are we gonna do?
Right.
Yeah.
And why would we? I love, God, says, who has been his counselor? God needs some counsel. He needs us to help him find solutions and fix things. And it's interesting to watch people's response to that audacity of faith. It rings true with them somehow, Father, using the magnet, of faith to start drawing on them. And people say, yeah, I do know that. I do see what you're saying, but here's a beautiful thing that I found. I'm trying to think now. Sometime right around the time I left the pastorate, the verse that became one of the two verses that became my great realization at that time was Philippians 2:13. The other one is also in Philippians. He who has begun a good work in you will perform it until the day of Christ, of Jesus Christ. So that was one thing. I knew that this was God's work in me, and God's going to take care of it. He's going to finish it. That's a good place, to lay hold of. The other one is Philippians 2:13. I'll read to you in the King James first. For it is God who works in you, both
to will.
Get in the King. Both to will and to do of his good pleasure. God's pleased with what we will and what we do because he worked it.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Well, the concordance is even more beautiful. For it is God who is operating in you to will as well as to work for the sake of his delight. God is not only pleased with you and me. Why would he be? He wrote our script.
Right.
So if he was displeased with us or undelighted in us, whose problem would that be? Would that be our problem? Or would it be the script writer's problem? I would say if an actor says the wrong lines and his character is not being brought forth, that it's the script writer's problem.
Mm-hmm.
So delight, God's delighted with our will, and God's delighted with our work. He's the one operating it. Now, Rotherham, I think I even like Rotherham better. Rotherham, that word for work, we've already discussed this before, but this Greek word for work in the King James and operating in the Concordant is the word energy or energizes. God energizes our will and he energizes our work. He's the one behind it, no matter what it looks like, no matter what we think about it. The actor doesn't have to approve the script. He just carries it out. So Rotherham puts it this way. He just really directly translates that word as to its meaning. He says, for it is God who energizes within you both the desiring and the energizing in the behalf of his good pleasure. Wow.
Wow. That's beautiful.
And if we will lay hold of that, in him we live and move and have our being. In him we live and move and are. And if we'll just live in that, there, you want to talk, what greater place of worship than to live in this conscious awareness every day, day by day, hour by hour, moment by moment, that we are living in the breath of, we are living in the movement of God. We are living in the being of God as his offspring, as his kin, the Concordance says. And we doing so to God's good pleasure. We are doing so to his delight. We are doing so well pleased to God. Man. There's worship. We live in that moment by moment. There's fellowship with God. Prayer. That's the real prayer that we have toward God. Because the word prayer, the Greek is what? Toward well-being. Toward well-being. That is to hold toward well-having. And that's in, the Eminence Bible translates, anytime the word prayer is there, it translates it to hold in well-being. Well, if we understand the sovereignty of God and we understand the things that Steve, you and I are talking about, then we hold everything. We hold ourselves in well-being. We hold our loved ones in well-being. We hold our friends and neighbors. We hold our enemies in well-being. We hold the news of the day in well-being. And that's communion and fellowship with God. We are on his page, our script.
And as you know, that's a whole different view of prayer, like we've been taught, where it's just begging and and pleading
we're becoming his counselor, so we're advising him of the next action he needs to take.
Right. Where when it's a realization of holding things in well-being, it's just again, it's the sovereignty of God. It comes back to that.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I think we have to ask ourselves, Steve, like we do it all the time. Does it get any better than this?
Yeah.
And we know the answer, right?
It does.
I can't hardly wait to find out.